today I'm going to be sharing what I think is a great strategy on USD JPY on the H1 time frame. And what's more, I'm even going to be providing the strategy as a free expert advisor for MT4 and MT5, so stick around to the end for that. Hundreds of hours have been spent generating this strategy and developing it, and although I've spent many hours on developing my generation process and robustness testing, in this case I've used the computer's power and the powerful generation software EA Studio to do most of the workload, and I've only used my own time to process final results at the end. So I'll show you how that's done now. So I've opened up EA Studio here, and this is the strategy that I have selected. But to give a brief understanding of how this was created, I'm going to step back and just show how the generator can be used. So basically, when I say hundreds of hours have been spent and EA Studio did most of the work, I've essentially used the generator. Well, in this case, the Reactor, but I'll speak about the generator first. So the generator allows us to select the data source. So we've got different brokers. In this case, I've used Eightcap, and then I've selected the symbol USD JPY, H1 time frame. We give it parameters we want to use. So we're giving it ranges. It's going to trade long and short. We're saying we're wanting to use a stop loss always fixed, and between these values, we're able to specify if we want to use the whole sample of the data we've specified, the data range, or if we want to use some out of sample. I always use out of sample, 20%. You can see here we've used about 10 years to generate in this 20% out of sample time. And we can select different numbers of entry and exit indicators. And of course, we are able to tell it the acceptance criteria. So we're able to say, well, we want strategies that only pass certain types of acceptance criteria. We are able to do that for both in and out of sample and complete backtest. So I ran that for about 100 hours, 4 days. And I then get, it's not this generation because I've cut them down, but then you get all the strategies that are passing all those tests. And after 4 days of EA Studio doing a lot of hard work, I'm able to work my way through these and use my kind of experience of trading to select the ones that I think are the best and maybe perform some additional tests. And that's what I've done, and that's how we arrive at this strategy. So I'm just to go back one step further, I've actually used the Reactor, which is the generator combined with some inbuilt robustness testing. Okay, so you're able to apply the Monte Carlo or the multi-market and have it generate and then test for you, so I don't need to do that part manually. Then I get to come back after the computer's work for 4 days and have a look and do my final checks and selection. So that's how we arrive at this, as I've said. And so the strategy we've got here, it's been developed using Eightcap data. It works well on the premium data too, and I'm sure it will on other, but in this case I focused on Eightcap. That's who I'm going to be trading it on, and so that would be my recommendation for anyone wanting to open an Eightcap account, or if you want to read the review here on the Academy. There's a great review, and we can see that they've got a rating of 10 out of 10. They've got competitive spreads, they're fast execution. They've always been a good broker to me, so you can open an account through there. If I go back to the strategy, so how's the strategy work? Well, we can see that we've got a stop loss of 160 pips and a take profit of 120, so slightly more bigger loss than take profit, but we can see we win more often as well. And also there's an exit rule that doesn't necessarily mean that every trade goes for one of these two. There can be a middle ground, which we'll see when I look at the chart. And so we've got quite a simple strategy here as well. We've got 2 entry rules and 1 exit. Now, usually with trading, simple is best. We can see the statistics here. So we've got a good profit factor. We can see generally the equity curve is pretty kind of smooth, and there's going to be jumps down with all strategies, but it's also got a very good return over drawdown ratio. It makes a lot of trades. It looks like a good strategy to me, certainly from the statistics point of view, and it's not got too much stagnation. So let's have a look at the strategy and see what it does. So what it actually does, if I just quickly go back here, what it does basically determines that if you've got a moving average higher than the slow moving average, so in this case, if our 8 simple moving average is higher than our slow weighted moving average, so we can see that here, the red being the fast one and the blue one being the slower one, we're going to use that as a filter. And if the red is higher than this, and then the stochastic crosses the level line downwards, and that's using quite a high level line of 87, but it's suggesting the price is moving up. Statistically speaking, if this stochastic crosses down, it's more likely to bounce up and go for a take profit. profit than it is for a stop loss. And we've also got an additional exit rule where it's saying we're also going to exit basically if the bar crosses the upper Bollinger Band with a period of 10 and a deviation of 2.5. So we can see that we'll skip this trade because backtest software tends to just close the last trade wherever it is. It hasn't actually hit any of the things. So we'll just skip that trade and we'll move to this one. So we can see its example here. We can see that what's happened is, as we've said, the fast moving average is above the slow one. And this price has been above the 87 level and it's crossed below it. And statistically speaking, we're saying that we're more likely to then go towards this take profit than this stop loss. And we can see that that's actually what's happened. That's a perfect example of a trade going well. The next one is a trade not going so well, but we can also see where the exit rule has kind of come in to save us a bit here too. So although the exit rule maybe didn't save us, but it's closed us out for a small loss. So basically we've had that rule again. We've said, okay, we've crossed this back down. This is above this. So we're going to open a trade and we're expecting to hit this level before this level. But we've also got this close rule and it's closed it for a small loss. Had it been left, it would have actually come up here and closed for a profit. But that rule in this case has meant a small loss, but when it could have been a win, but in many cases it's a small loss when it could have been a bigger loss, you know. Here we can see the same thing. Again, it's open to trade because it's crossed down and this is above this and it's gone for take profit, and here it's gone for a loss. That's the logic of the strategy. Again, here we've got it's sold, so it's a reverse rule. It's sold. It probably could have hit the take profit, but the exit rules meant it's been a smaller win, but still the exit rule it helps the strategy long term. So that's basically how it's working. Like I said, in terms of robustness tests, it certainly works well on other data, but I'll be trading it on Eightcap. It's passed several Monte Carlo tests. So one of my favorite robustness tests is Monte Carlo simulation. So in this case, it's randomized lots of indicator parameters, and we can see that 19 out of 20 tests are still actually profitable. Maybe not as profitable, but they've passed the minimum profit factor of 1. I also quite like the randomized history test. So it's taking some of the data bars and randomizing them according to the ATR. And we can see that it's generally not too sensitive to the different data. We can randomly close positions. We can do a combination of all of them. We can see that generally we're getting 80% of tests passing, and it's a good indication of robustness. We can also do that, which I have done, for example, here. We can do it manually. It's basically the same thing. We're able to use EA Studio to just quickly check the sensitivity of things, maybe gently optimize it after it's passed all its criteria, which is what I've done. I tend to quite like gently optimizing the take profit and stop losses to be more round numbers. And you can see that's what I've done here. And also multi-market, we're able to do that. Now for the multi-market, it's quite a simple strategy. I like to see that there's no massive losses on all the markets. You know, one of them's been pretty stagnant, but a little bit profitable. These other ones have been a little bit negative, but it indicates to me that the strategy could reasonably easily be modified for these markets by modifying the parameters a little bit and the stop loss. I like to see that test, and many others have been performed. As I said, the strategy for me is certainly ready to trade. I would always recommend people give a strategy a period of time on a demo, at least 10 trades to kind of see how it's trading before then moving it to a small live. So that would be my recommendation, and I have exported these advisors as MT4 and MT5, as I've said, for you to be able to do that. This is one strategy. I ran the generation software for 4 days, and I've performed my kind of process of picking the best of a large collection and using kind of my experience to kind of select the strategies that I think are best of that collection that's passed all those automated tests. I'm going to provide this one for free, as I've said, and there's going to be a link in the description. However, for the new VIP club members, I've actually selected 5 strategies with this weekly generation that I'm going to be putting on my accounts, and so they're available to download for the new VIP subscribers. So if anyone's interested in that, I'll show you where that can be signed up for. So we've got this link here, thetradingacademy.com/VIP. You can join the VIP club. There's a lot more than just these strategies There's a lot more value in there. I'm sure you can have a look and see what's on offer and if that's worth it to you. But for more strategies generated by myself and picked by myself, they will be available on the VIP club. So if you like this content, hit the like button, please. That's always appreciated. And subscribe and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss future videos. And as I said, these Expert Advisor can be downloaded using the link in the description. And to check out more free strategies, check out this previous video now. Trade safe, and I'll see you next time.